Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Well, technically it won't be evening when you watch this, or it might be. You know what? Never mind. Welcome to the latest episode of TechForge. Oh, I am your host, as ever, the omnipresent Ned, aka Dynamo Ned.
With the presence of Omni.
Yep.
And here we have Jason Hunter with me tonight. How you doing, guys?
Doing good.
How you doing, Ned?
Doing pretty good. Not too bad. Work was kind of long today, but that happens. You know, I almost hate the days that have a very little work to them more than I do the ones that are super busy, because those are the ones that drag forever.
Yeah, it was the same way with me today. It was just like, can this day get over already? We had a lot of calls in the morning, but we didn't have a lot of calls in the afternoon, which is pretty typical for Thursday and also for Friday. So it was just like one call. I had enough time to do a few things, and then another call.
I actually was kind of wishing I had that kind of day today. I got online at 6:30 in the morning, and I didn't get off till 5.
Oof.
Ouch.
Yeah, well, this is my last functional day, kind of, pretty much, for this job. So, yeah, it was good, but it was interesting.
Interesting good, or interesting in the Chinese curse sense?
Interesting good. It was tough. I had my exit interview at the end of the day with my boss, and that was tough. That was tough. It was. I'm gonna miss this group. They're a good bunch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's always hard when you make friends at your job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am not looking forward to when I have to leave my current position, because there's a lot of things there that drive me up the wall, but I work with some good people.
That's the hardest part, isn't it? You know, when you've got some really good, like-minded people, and that's the hardest part. You know, you develop those personal relationships, and yeah, I understand. But well, like you say, you got to forge on.
Yep, got to forge on.
Yep.
All right. So there's several big things in tech news this week. Probably the two biggest things, two big topics we're going to focus on tonight. Once we get through the little minor stories, of course, Threadripper 2, the embargo lifted last week on unboxings and all that stuff. So we got to see it, but we didn't get to see any performance numbers. Well, the embargo for performance reviews went up on Monday, and we finally got to see some of those benchmark numbers from the 2990WX and the 2950X. And the results were interesting.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about that some here in just a little bit. And also the fact that Nvidia, not to be outdone by one of their rivals, decided to drop a trailer earlier this week teasing their upcoming RTX 2080 GPU, which we now have almost confirmation that, yes, it is going to be the 20 series rather than the 11 series, as was previously thought. And that Nvidia is going to be going for a new branding scheme using the RTX naming scheme for their high-end GPUs. But first, there's a couple other things we need to talk about in the tech news. First one for this evening, we talked about AMD. We're going to talk about Nvidia, but it wouldn't be complete unless we completed the trifecta with Intel. And unfortunately, Intel has some more bad news for its CPUs this week. There is a new CPU vulnerability that is being called Foreshadow, or the LTF1 attack. I have the article here from PC World, but I've also got a link included in the article links down below to the actual page where the academic paper was written about it, and also where they describe the attack in detail. The technical name for what Foreshadow is that it is a speculative execution attack on Intel processors that breaks virtual memory abstraction with transient out-of-order execution of instructions. Now, I realize for a lot of our audience, that sounds like a lot of technobabble.
Pretty much.
Basically, the idea is that it uses a feature in Intel CPUs called SGX. And that it uses a similar technique to the Meltdown and Spectre bugs that were patched earlier this year, but it uses it with these SGX instructions, or this SGX feature, in a way that previously was thought not possible.
Ah, okay. So it sounds to me like they're using an extremely creative method of attack.
Yes, there's a reason it's considered on par with Meltdown and Spectre in the way, in that it is a very unusual vector to attack the CPU from. But, you know, Meltdown and Spectre and its associated problems brought to light that these problems do in fact exist because of Intel CPUs using a cache prediction technique called speculative execution.
Mm-hmm.
And so excuse me, I got this wrong earlier. It's the L1 terminal fault attack, or L1TF, but it's being called Foreshadow by the researchers who found it. And it uses the SGX, or the security guard extensions, within the core series of processors that Intel makes.
But the article speaks to, if you've already patched or updated your BIOS for Spectre and Meltdown, that the risk is somewhat mitigated.
Right. So for most consumers, this isn't something you really have to worry a whole lot about. It's something serious, more serious for people in the enterprise. But if you've patched for Meltdown and Spectre, it eliminates what they're calling the original Foreshadow attack. Now, there's a version called Foreshadow NG, or Foreshadow Next Generation, which uses a more significant version of the attack. Let's see. On the website for the actual research paper, they say, quote, Intel identified two related attacks, which we are henceforth calling Foreshadow NG. These attacks can potentially be used to read any information residing in the L1 cache of the CPU, including information belonging to the system management mode, the operating system's kernel, or even the hypervisor.
So one thing that's pretty scary here, if someone gets pretty creative with these types of attacks, they're hypothesizing essentially that they could essentially exploit virtual machines.
Yes, and that's the really scary part.
Yeah.
Because they're basically, what this does is it basically lets the attacker read directly from the L1 cache, completely circumventing all the safety guards that are supposed to be in place to keep you from reading directly from that cache in this manner.
That's pretty scary, man.
And like I said, Go ahead.
It just makes me, it reminds me of the phrase, for every lock, there's always a key. For every lock, there's always somebody who knows how to hack, to break it, and try to break it. Same thing here. Oh, you have security in everywhere except for L1 cache? Well, we're going to figure out a way to circumvent all that and get to L1 cache. Makes security a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's like my grandfather used to say, the lock is only there to stop the honest man.
Yeah.
That's a good phrase, man. There's some truth behind that wisdom.
And the thing is, we can do everything in our power to make things secure, but there's always going to be somebody out there in the eternal war between offense and defense who's going to find some way to crack it.
Yeah, because there could be things that info security people know how to patch, but they don't think about all the opportunities, all the loopholes. I think if somebody was a hacker, like ethical hackers, you can get your certificate of ethical hacking. Somebody who was that kind of way probably is better equipped to know how to patch stuff, but most IT security people probably don't know how to patch everything.
Yeah, that's the thing. People who do security work, who are in the cybersecurity field, are merely human.
Yeah.
They make mistakes. They make assumptions. All of it comes down to, in the end, that if you stay past, you stay up to date, and you do everything in your power to stay safe, it's still not a 100% guarantee that your system is secure.
Mm-hmm.
As a very wise Linux system admin once told me, there are two types of system: compromised and those who don't know they're compromised yet.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty scary. That's
Still,
pretty scary.
Intel is saying that they are patching out this problem in hardware with their Cascade Lake CPUs, which are the Xeons coming out late this year.
Mm.
And AMD is saying that their EPYC series CPUs and their derivatives, such as the Ryzen CPUs, do not seem to be affected by this bug because they do not use the same speculative execution techniques that Intel does. Still, as the PC World article puts it, what this means for you: patch, patch, patch.
Mm-hmm.
Stay up to date.
Yes, I know Windows Update is probably one of the most annoying things in Windows 10. And it was pretty annoying in Windows 7, honestly. But it's important you stay up to date.
Right.
I'm also glad to see Intel admitting to this exploit, that it does exist, and that they aren't trying to cover it up like they did with Spectre and Meltdown.
Yeah, they tried pretty hard. I'm not Nvidia hard, but yeah, they tried really hard to basically say that nothing was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost like the government. It's training operation. It's training exercise.
Yep.
So, yeah, if you want to find out more about this particular CPU flaw, I suggest you go to the website from the researchers who actually found the flaw at https://foreshadowattack.eu. They have you can download a copy of the paper. You can watch a demo of the attack in action. They have a video demo of the attack being done both in Windows and in Linux. And they describe in detail who found the attack, how to execute the attack, and how to mitigate it. Obviously, there's some things they can't say because of the proprietary nature of Intel's architecture and yada, yada, yada. But
right. Shadow. I wonder if it was an ethical hacker that found it. Speaking back to something Hunter said earlier.
I mean, that's what I thought the Meltdown and Spectre were found by white hat hackers who just wanted to see what was out there. I think I heard that or read that somewhere. So that might have been the same thing with Foreshadow, unless it was actual.
According to the website, it looks like it was found independently by two different teams. One,
that's right.
One with Imek Distranet and KU Leuven, as well as a team out of the University of Michigan, partnering with the University of Adelaide.
That almost sounds like they all stumbled upon it almost at the same time.
Well, they independently and concurrently discovered the flaw. So,
and going back to the first two vulnerabilities, that's what I forgot is it was found by two security companies. We talked about that a while ago.
But yeah, Intel's had a rough year this year when it comes to CPU vulnerabilities, but it does sound like they have learned their lesson, and they are going to patch it out on the hardware level with their upcoming Xeons. So that much is good to hear.
So basically, they've moved on from being GM to Toyota, where they admit their problems, or Volkswagen with Dieselgate. Sorry, guys. My bad.
Speaking of Intel, though, Intel doesn't just have CPU news this week. They also have, strangely enough, news about their first discrete GPU. Or, well, not really their first, because there was the failed Larrabee experiment back in 2008.
Yep.
But this time, they think they have it right. And
well, they hired the right people.
That they did. And so this is from Tom's Hardware, but I also have links to the original tweet from Intel. Intel tweets first video of its discrete gaming GPU. So Intel, not exactly someone you'd think of when it comes to graphics hardware. I mean, yes, we've all probably, if we've had an Intel processor in the last decade, been, would fortunate be the right word, to use Intel integrated graphics until we could get a discrete card in there?
I don't know. Well, I guess you could look at it from two sides of the fence. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have stable graphics, but they don't perform worth a darn.
Yeah.
In any graphically intensive application.
I will say this. I had a HP EliteBook 8460p. Sandy Bridge mobile CPU, Intel HD graphics 2500. I will say, even on Ubuntu, that plays Team Fortress 2 decently well. I can get between 30 and 40 frames a second.
That's not bad. Team Fortress 2, is that a Source engine?
It is.
Yep.
I would not try to play CSGO on it, mind you, but Team Fortress 2 runs well enough.
That frame rate is, dare I say it, console FPS. That's my only joke.
I mean,
I'm not going to get too much into that.
I mean, but it's integrated graphics. I got to give it a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah.
So this looks like they're just reminding people, hey, we're working on stuff.
I'm wondering if they're going to bundle this with their CPU, any of their CPUs. If they bundle the GPU, the dedicated GPU, with a CPU.
Like
for
the AMD crates?
gaming. Yeah, like an AMD crate. Be an Intel crate.
Don't know. I don't know. Well, for one, I'm very much looking forward to any kind of competition in the graphics.
Yeah.
It will be nice to see an Intel response.
Yeah.
And I mean, they poached themselves some good talent. They've got Raja Kaduri over there, who came over from AMD after the fiasco that was Vega.
Yeah.
I'm still a little sad about that.
I agree with you. I'm there with you. And not only Kadori though, they've had some. They hired away some really good marketing people, and they've also stealth hired a bunch of really good architects.
Yeah,
not just from AMD, but from Apple, from really good graphical areas of the mobile sector too. So they've got some very smart people working hard over there right now.
Sounds like they're going to make a good GPU then.
And Intel has the R&D money to burn.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. And this is a different feeling from past projects. This feels like they've got every intent to get into this market. And I think it's mainly because of the all of the compute sectors of the data sector. They look at all the profit that Nvidia is making, and AMD, mostly Nvidia though, and that is a growing market sector that's growing by heaps and droves every single quarter.
So if they can make a competitive Quadro type card, they could definitely compete with Nvidia in the workstation world and enterprise world for graphics capability.
Yep.
Which would be pretty interesting.
Yep. And I think they would also adopt FreeSync.
Yeah.
And with additional competition, you would see the anti-technology approaches Nvidia is taking.
Yeah.
Maybe not come to a standstill, but at least it would be heavily mitigated.
Well, if they don't make their own kind of sync and adopt FreeSync, then that would definitely help. I don't know if they would create their own kind of sync that's the same kind of level of having a circuit board in monitors, because I'm sure they've seen from the prices of the G-Sync monitors, it's just really not affordable to go that way.
Right, I completely agree.
Because I can't afford a $500 or $600 monitor itself that I want to get, because I have a Nvidia card. It makes me wish I didn't get an Nvidia card. That's how much of a pain G-Sync is. And seeing how cheap the FreeSync monitors makes me wish I got a AMD card. And that's an hope that Intel sees that and doesn't go the same way of making their own kind of proprietary sync capability.
Well, between the $100 and $250 price point, you can get anything from a 1080p gaming FreeSync monitor to a 1440p.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so, I was looking at a monitor today. It's a 24-inch, 144 hertz, 1080p ViewSonic XG 24-inch on Amazon for $219.
That's a pretty good price.
Is that FreeSync?
144 hertz monitor?
144 hertz FreeSync.
That's a heck of a deal right there. That's a good deal.
The cheapest G-Sync monitor, 24-inch, is like $329 maybe, or $350. The cheapest 27-inch is like $499. $450 on sale. Maybe $440 on sale, but usually $499 and up. And up to like $800. I've seen 27 and above inch, 1440p, 144 hertz G-Sync for $799.99. I'm like, why? You're paying. That's basically like buying a 1080 twice.
So I'm making a prediction, folks. I'm making a prediction. Intel adopts FreeSync in their GPUs.
I hope so.
Would not surprise me at all.
You can get it in Samsung TVs and LG TVs right now.
Right.
So, yeah.
That would be funny if they made like a marketing video for adopting FreeSync and it'd be like a jab and Nvidia.
Yeah.
But I don't know how Nvidia could respond, because if they dump their proprietary circuit board and monitors, I mean, it would help I would say it would help their market share, because they could actually go up in value.
Well, if I'm wrong, I'm sending Hunter and Ned $5 a piece.
See, the only thing about it is G-Sync has better quality versus FreeSync, because it's a circuit board. It's like having a CPU versus an adapter or something.
Yeah, but that's also why G-Sync costs so much more. When you have a custom FPGA in there that's basically doing all the HDR work along with all the G-Sync work.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw a review for the Asus ROG Swift XG27 whatever alphanumeric designation they're using this week.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, $2,000 is what they want for that gaming monitor.
Wow.
For 106
inch?
27 inch, 165 hertz.
Jeez.
But it's 4K.
Oh, that makes sense.
4K, 165 hertz. And it supports HDR10.
Yeah, makes sense with all those features in 4K.
But I was looking at an equivalent FreeSync monitor today from a different brand, and it was running about $600. Now, admittedly, it was not 165 hertz. It was a 120 hertz monitor.
Still, that gap between 600 and 2,000 is huge.
Yeah. 600 is already pretty steep, but
2,000 is the price of a full build. Is the maybe high end full computer build.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's why I hate Intel's pricing. Is like, I could buy this one little CPU for the price of my whole entire build, and then I have to tack on the entire build.
Yeah, that's Ryzen 2700X, 16 gigs of fast RAM. That's a nice case.
Yeah.
That's a 1 terabyte SSD. That's a 1080 Ti. Oh my gosh, man!
And then you still have money left over for your FreeSync monitor.
Yeah.
Exactly. I saw that reminds me of have y'all seen the big picture monitors? The gaming monitors, basically the size of a TV.
Yes, the Wasabi Mangoes and
yes.
the like.
Yeah, and they have G-Sync, and they're like at least $2,000, which makes sense because they're about a 40-inch TV. But who in their right mind? I can think of a lot of people, gaming enthusiasts, but consumers on my level who in their right mind would spend that much money.
That's crazy. It almost makes me want to push Ned to get us a segment where we look for redonkulously priced G-Sync monitors every week and say, okay, what else can you buy for $2,000? You know what I mean?
And also compare them to the FreeSync monitors.
Right.
Fun.
Right.
Yeah. So here on eBay, the Wasabi Mango. This is a 43-inch 4K UHD gaming monitor, 120 hertz, IPS display. Do you want to know what it is brand new?
Oh, I don't want to know.
$3,000.
I don't want to know. $4,000.
$1,367.
Oh,
What was it? Oh, okay.
$1,367.90 versus I could go buy the ROG Swift for $2,000.
Yeah.
Something that is a quarter of the screen real estate.
But HDR10. So your colors look brighter. It's like HDR10 just makes me think of, oh, that person's got high brightness on, not really doing much. It's just you turn your brightness up.
But 1,000 nits, Hunter. 1,000 nits.
You know, the sad part of that is that at $700, if RAM prices were still 2016 prices, you're like right on the border of building a system that can push 120 hertz.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right on the border. 100 or 200 more. Boom. There you go.
Anyway, we got far afield there, but Intel making their own graphics. You know what? I wish them the best. I'm always glad and grateful to see more competition in a space because that ultimately means we, the consumer, win.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the reviews. That's going to be a good day.
Yeah, and then you don't have... I'm going to try not to segue too much, but then you don't have proprietary Nvidia monopolizer guy coming across. And I've got plenty of ammo for ray tracing, man.
I was going to say, we're getting there.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
We got some goodies coming up, though, man.
But in less fortunate news, one of the big case manufacturers, well, I say big, they're well-known in enthusiast circles, or perhaps the better way to say it is they were well-known in enthusiast circles. Case Labs, makers of the SMA-08 and other high-end enthusiast cases, sadly has fallen into bankruptcy and is facing liquidation.
That's kind of sad state, man.
Yeah. They posted on their Facebook page on August 10th saying the following. We are very sad to announce that Case Labs and its parent company will be closing permanently. We have been forced into bankruptcy and liquidation. Then they talk about how they believe that the recent trade tariffs contributed a major role to their prices increasing. The default of a large account added greatly to this problem and hit us at the worst possible time. We reached out for a possible deal that would allow us to continue on and persevere, but in the end, it didn't happen. We're doing our best to ship as many orders as we can, but we won't be able to ship them all. So if you had any plans to get yourself a Case Labs case for whatever reason, sadly, you probably won't be able to.
Well, hopefully people that don't get their cases can get their money back.
I would certainly hope so.
Because these aren't cheap, man. $200, $500. They're nice cases, but still. I mean,
yeah. I'm not sure I buy the logic of the tariffs, but that's a completely separate issue. Right. If an increase in tariffs causes your business to go under, it indicates to me there was likely something wrong with your fundamentals.
Yeah. Well, if they were getting their any kind of materials from overseas, then high tariffs, I mean, it's more costly to get those materials. I don't really know what.
Well, they just didn't operate in a manner that allowed them to shield themselves a little bit from potential bumps in the road.
And that's somewhat to be expected when you're a boutique vendor who deals in low volume. I mean, there's only so much you can do to mitigate that kind of risk.
True.
But from what we do know, Case Labs is going to try as honor as many of their, the previous transactions as they can. Parts orders will go out as normal, they claim. But they have disabled their website from taking any additional orders just to make sure that no one else orders and in case they are unable to fulfill it.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. Case Labs, they made some good stuff. The one I was familiar with was their SMA08 case. And I don't even know if there's really a competitor in their space anymore. I know there used to be Mountain Mods, which also made a similar style of case, but I haven't checked on them in years. And so,
what about Digital Storm? I would think Digital Storm would be a competitor.
Well, kind of, sort of. They're a boutique builder, but, I mean, their business model is more in fully custom PCs. They do make their own cases. Digital Storm does the Aventum series, but I don't think you can buy those separate from a Digital Storm system, though.
Yeah, if you go to their website, like under the product section, they've only got 3 sections: desktops, workstations, and laptops. Yeah, that you can't really, unless they supply them directly to some vendor or something that sells them.
And in fact, the only boutique builder I know of that supplies their cases separate from their actual builds is Origin PC with their Millennium series.
Yeah.
Main Gear also has their F131, but I think you had to buy the full system from them. You can't. I don't think you can buy an F131 unless you get it pre-built from them.
I guess you could kind of consider NZXT in that space, considering the fact that they do custom build, but it's basically you're getting parts for mainly street prices, and then they just charge you, a fee for building it, essentially.
Right. Yeah, I guess you could technically put them in that space. I mean, they're really a manufacturer and PC accessories maker who just so happen to have a pre-build service, their BLD service.
Yeah.
Which we discussed one of their options last week with their H700 Nuka-Cola edition, which I desperately want one of.
Ned, if I could buy you that case, if I was a millionaire, I'd buy you that case, man. That's a nice case.
Oh.
It's only $300.
And the motherboard that goes with it is only $300 more.
Wait, and then the motherboard cover is only $30, so it's only $630.
Well, technically, if you buy the motherboard with the cover together, they give you a discount, quote unquote. And so you can get the motherboard for $249, and then with the cover for $300.
Okay.
But still, it's almost pretty enough that I would be willing to fork out that money.
Agreed.
All right. Well, that takes care of the little tech news, or the smaller news stories. So let's move on to some of the bigger, one of the 2 big news pieces this week. Of course, we talked about this some last week. I wanted to make sure that we did get the chance to discuss it this week some more, and that is AMD's Threadripper 2. Now that the reviews are out, now the benchmarks are out, there is lots of good, but there is some bad. And so I did want to give that its due airtime. I included in the article links to 2 reviews that discuss both the pros and the cons of this particular CPU, particularly the 2990WX. Both Anantech and TechSpot basically said the 2950X is a faster, more efficient 1950X, and they had nothing bad to say about it, basically. It is everything they expected it to be. A faster, more efficient 1950X. But when it came to the 2990WX, they were slightly less charitable. Let's see, the phrase that Anantech used was that simply there is no doubt that when the AMD Ryzen Threadripper 2990WX gets a chance to work its legs, it will do so with gusto. That being said, the power consumption when using half the cores at 4 gigahertz pushes up to 260 watts, leaving a fully loaded CPU nudging 450 to 500 watts, and when overclocked to 4 gigahertz, spiking over 600. Users will need to make sure that their motherboard and power supply are up to the task.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking 32 cores, man. So,
but that's a workstation CPU. So wouldn't a workstation motherboard be able to handle it?
Yeah, not all of them. There's some pretty. There's some VRMs out there that I'd say are pretty sketchy. You need some pretty extreme cooling to be able to run that kind of workload.
Yeah.
If you don't want a 24/7 workload like that, that's for sure.
Well, basically what Anantech thinks, they have a big, long write-up, but their conclusion is basically this. The big problem with the 2990WX is that it is basically an all-or-nothing CPU. In the workloads where it does well, it absolutely creams its competition. In particular, the Core i9-7980XE. But in other workloads, it has issues, particularly with power draw and with memory bandwidth, where a CPU with slightly more than half as many cores, such as the 7980XE, winds up outperforming it. But these are typically memory-intensive tasks. And TechSpot points out why that's so. In their testing, they were able to determine that the 2990WX, because it uses the Infinity Fabric structure for memory bandwidth, the 2990WX basically adds latency to memory access because only 2 of the dies have direct access to memory. The other 2 dies have to basically go through the Infinity Fabric interconnect to those dies to get to memory. Which means when you're using more than 16 of those cores, or you're using cores that don't have direct memory access, you become bandwidth limited.
Do you know how Epic gets around this limitation? They have 8 channels.
Yeah, that's the critical difference.
Yep.
So Threadripper is essentially an Epic chip with one big difference. It only has quad channel memory versus Epic's octo channel.
On top of that, each die has their own PCIe lanes in Epic. But you get enough PCIe lanes here, I think, that it's not really an issue. there might be a use case or two where that's an issue, but it'd have to be a very extreme use case. Yeah.
And so basically what the advice that seems to be going around the internet from a benchmarking perspective is that for even the high-end desktop user, the person who is going to be doing extensive creative work, the consensus seems to be the best value is the 2950X. The 2990WX, if you have a very specific rendering workload or a workload that scales well across cores but is not terribly memory intensive, then yes, the 2990WX is an absolute monster. But TechSpot illustrates this. They use a POV ray, which is a workload that it's a ray tracing workload, but it's one that scales well with cores, wherein you're basically getting an insane price performance value in that workload. But they have a separate workload in Adobe Premiere that is CUDA accelerated, where the 2990WX doesn't perform any faster than the previous generation 1920X due to those memory bandwidth limitations.
So this is interesting. You know that AMD is going to have a solution, not this generation, but probably next. And it makes you wonder what their solution is going to be. I think it's going to go either one of two ways. They'll either have a new chipset that is better utilized for this and potentially create two tiers for Threadripper or DDR5.
I think you may be onto something there. I mean, that's kind of what they did this round. You've got the X series processors with the 2920 and the 2950. You have the WX with the 2970 and the 2990. So I think you might be onto something there. I think they might be setting the groundwork for that, and that we could see an X499 or X599 chipset in the near future.
Well, like a tier for the WX. So say you have like the WX tier, you know, for your high thread CPUs, and go with either a 6 or an 8 channel memory subsystem, and then have have the other chipset for your X series Threadrippers, or DDR5. And DDR5 is coming. I mean, we're a year or two away from that, I think. That 2950 looks like what, $900? That's not bad.
Yeah, it's basically it's a faster, more efficient 1950X for $100 less than when the 1950X launched.
Makes it a better buy.
Yeah, and that seems to be the consensus across the internet, is that the 2950X is the best buy.
And it's still really competitive, even with Intel's $2,000 part.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, Intel's part, with two more, I think it's got 2 more cores, right?
Yeah, it has 2 more cores with 18 versus the 2950X is 16.
1632.
Mm-hmm. But it's half the price.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And it's got a better platform, in my opinion. More PCIe lanes and.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and considering the other part that's Intel has at that price point, which is the 7900X, which I believe is a 10-core part. The 2950X just wipes the floor with the 7900X.
What's the other part? The 29. What was it? It was 12-core part, right?
Yes, the 2920X, which neither AnandTech nor TechSpot have had the chance to test yet, because those are not coming out till later.
Okay.
But
maybe I'm going out on a limb, but I want to say the 2920X would probably perform better than the 7900.
It was pretty close already between the 1920X and the 7900X, especially considering the 1920X right now is only $485.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
That's not far away from 2700X, man.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, the 2700X MSRP is $329. There was actually a fire sale on the 1920Xs last week when the 2990 and the 2950 were announced. There was about a 2-hour period on Amazon where you could get a 1920X for $249.
That's the price of a Ryzen 5 26 or 1600X. Like 2600 or 2600X at that level. That's what we were talking about last week or last time, is how cheap it was. And then I looked at it. I was like, nope, they're all gone.
Yeah. They sold out in literally a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And you can still technically buy them, but they're almost all from third-party sellers, and they're almost all running about $450 to $480.
Yeah, they're going to jack them. They're going to jack them up.
Yep. I wonder if, now that makes me think, how many people bought those processors and intentionally resell them at a higher price on Amazon?
Oh, I have no doubt that there are plenty of them. But still, if you wanted an entry-level, if you wanted a basic CPU to get you into the Threadripper X399 platform, it'd be hard to argue with buying a 1920X at $450.
Yeah.
It really would, actually, considering what you get in the platform.
Yeah, and considering the upgrade path you'd have to a 2950, or even if you needed it for your workload, a 2990WX.
So here's the $1 million question. Will the 2970WX face the same situation or the same limitation/weakness as the 2990 Big Daddy?
I think that's a good question.
I
And
think
my
it's
guess,
probably borderline at least.
my guess is probably yes, because once you move beyond the two dies that are directly connected to the memory, like beyond the 2950X, then those other two dies, they have to go through, and they don't have direct memory access. You're gonna run into problems every single time.
So yeah, so those cores will have problematic issues.
I don't think it'll be as bad as on the 2990WX because you're not going to have as many cores fighting for bandwidth. But I think we'll also see a commensurate decrease in per core performance.
Yeah.
But not all the news for the 2990WX is bad. According to Jason Evangelo over at Forbes, as well as some tests done by Phoronix, which is a Linux open source testing benchmark suite, the 2990WX is as much as 50% faster on Linux than it is in Windows 10.
Really?
indicating that perhaps part of the problem with the 2990WX is in the Windows scheduler. You know, we had a similar problem with the first-gen Threadripper as well as the first-gen Ryzen last year, where the Windows scheduler had to be optimized before we saw significant performance gains.
So optimizations are coming. That's what that means.
Pretty much.
That could be interesting.
So Phoronix did a test where they used 7-zip because it's available across all platforms. And they did the compression test. Now, typically on Windows, Threadripper does amazingly well at decompression. Like, completely blows out the competition. But it struggles with compression workloads.
Are compression workloads AVX based?
Some of them are, but not all of them. 7-zip is not. So, in the 7-zip compression test, they test compression speed. And in Windows 10 Pro, the 2990WX did 41,145 MIPS, or million instructions per second. Sounds pretty fast. Until you compare it to Ubuntu, where it did 94,492 MIPS. So it is over twice as fast in Ubuntu 18.04. And in OpenSUSE Tumbleweed, Tumbleweed is their rolling release, it does 99,098 MIPS. And that's just in that one workload. You can see what a difference that makes.
That's crazy.
In addition, they took the Blender workload that AMD has been using, that Ryzen render of the Ryzen CPU, that they've been using to demo all of their Ryzen and Threadripper CPUs. And they ran it in Windows 10, Clear Linux, Antergos, OpenSUSE, and Ubuntu. In Windows 10 Pro, the render took 206.11 seconds. Or excuse me, this is not the Ryzen test. This was the Classroom Blender file. This is a classic Blender test that Phoronix has used for a while. My bad. I apologize. I misread the benchmark chart.
It's alrighty.
So, in the Classroom workload, on Windows 10 Pro, the 2990WX using a CPU-only render took 206.11 seconds. On the slowest version of Linux tested, which was Clear Linux 24200, it took 157.45 seconds. Remember, these are both in Blender. The only difference is the operating system. It's the same workload. It's the same version of Blender, Blender 2.97 alpha or 2.79 alpha. And the fastest was Ubuntu 18.04, where it did it in 156.4 seconds. That is almost 50 seconds faster on Linux compared to on Windows 10.
So everybody needs to just jump on to Linux instead of Windows.
I love this little bit off of the article, though. But the Microsoft OS did come out ahead in the Solitaire subtest.
Yeah. Go awesome. Windows.
All you old folks out there, there you go.
They also had this to say, and this was their kind of concluding remark over on Phoronix. In all of our Blender tests, the performance on Linux was clearly better by at least 15% compared to Windows 10. However, in single-threaded tests, such as the FLAC audio encoding and Blake 2 tests, the Threadripper 2990WX performed equally across Windows 10 Pro and Linux. And that FFmpeg also favored performance under Windows 10 compared to most Linux distros.
It's interesting.
Therefore, these results seem to indicate a problem of scalability of Windows 10 Pro across the many CPU cores in heavily multi-threaded workflows. And so, since almost all the tech reviewers are testing under Windows, it indicates that there may be a problem with the way Windows handles so many cores. And so,
it's a really good find. That's impressive, actually.
And so it may be, there's no way for us to really know yet. But I would pin my suspicions on the fact that because Windows 10 Pro is designed largely for the business user, that it really hasn't been optimized to scale to that many cores.
Well, I mean, when you're looking at 64 threads, you're usually thinking of a server.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly. So,
but I mean, Microsoft has told us for years that the code base between Windows and Windows Server is essentially the same.
Yeah. Apparently not. Or not as efficient as Linux. Obviously.
So it would seem. And also, one other bit of interesting Ryzen Threadripper news. We'll close out with this, or we'll close out this section with this. AMD Ryzen Threadripper 2990WX overclocked to 6 gigahertz on LN2.
That's a steaming pot right there.
On all cores?
Oh, that's what I was trying to check. It says here, Indonesian overclocker Ivan Kupa, or Kappa, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, honestly, achieved a clock frequency of 5,955.4 megahertz on the 2990WX. On an MSI Meg X390 Creation motherboard with a Corsair 15-watt, 100-watt power supply, using a CPU voltage of 1.68 volts.
Wow.
And temperatures of a negative 184 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
That's a super high voltage.
Yeah.
That's kind of... I'd hate to see what kind of power that thing was consuming.
Nice temp, though. Negative 184.
Man, you're probably pushing 1,000 watts.
Probably.
That's crazy.
At the same event, another overclocker was able to get to 5.4 gigahertz and to run the HWBot X265 benchmark with its 4K in its 4K run mode, and currently holds the world record for that benchmark.
Sweet.
Somebody posted in a PC Builder group book the picture of the guy who's cooling the CPU, the 2990WX with the LN2. The way he sits, the way he's standing, and the stuff around it makes him look like he's cooking burgers. I'm like, I looked at it first, like, that looks, yeah, makes sense.
Yum, 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 yum.
Ryzen burgers. They are rising out of the pan.
Let's see. So in this article from WCCF Tech, here's all the records that the 2990WX currently holds. Highest CPU frequency of 5,955.4 megahertz. The W prime 32 million calculation of 1 second, 950 milliseconds. The W prime 1024 million run of 18 seconds, 420 milliseconds. Cinebranch R11.5 of 52.67 points. Cinebench R15 of 8,532 CBs. The GPU PI version 3.3 for CPU 1B test of 40 seconds, 706 milliseconds. The HWBot X265 benchmark, 29.363 frames per second. That's actually a very impressive result for the 4K benchmark. And the Geekbench 3 multi-core score of 115,579 points.
Those all sound impressive, but I have no baseline for reference. So.
Well, for comparison, remember that Intel, with their 28-core 56-thread with their 28-core 56-thread demonstration at Computex, that CPU, also overclocked and under a water chiller, achieved a score of 7,334 points in Cinebench R15. In comparison, under LN2, the 2990WX did 8,532 CB.
Okay.
Isn't a liquid nitrogen, I guess it's liquid nitrogen too, isn't that more efficient than a chiller?
Technically.
It will keep the CPU significantly colder because liquid nitrogen is negative 327 degrees Celsius.
But the liquid's consumed.
Yes, and so you have to constantly keep pouring more liquid nitrogen in the entire time.
That makes sense from the videos I've seen of the competition. Then keep pouring in the liquid.
And then you've got to account for the condensation coming off the pot.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
So, by and large, it's looking like Threadripper is off to a ripping start.
Well,
for its second generation.
You know, they're keeping the pressure on Intel, so it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's hard to argue with them pushing the boundaries, as it were. And yeah, the 2990WX is as TechSpot put it, a very focused product, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No. Not at all. It's introducing more competition in that space. It just feels really good. We've got competition in the CPU sector.
So I'm also looking at another test, Blender 2.78 B BMW plus Cinebench 15 R15. The Threadripper 2990WX Cinebench score was 3,432 compared to the Core i9 7980XE was 278.
So was that the single core score?
That sounds impressive.
It's down here in the comments on the article.
Which article?
Blue.
Sorry.
This should be for the WFCC Tech for the overclocking 6 gigahertz article.
Okay, I see what you're talking about.
Saw the comparison and it looked interesting.
Oh, right. That's from PC World's test. I didn't include those in the link, but there's a... But yeah, the PC World test does provide some more interesting data, although it largely mirrors what I saw from AnandTech and TechSpot.
So is hot hardware. Ugh. Hot hardware. They have a similar type of data set out of their review.
Good stuff. Good stuff all around.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we've talked about AMD quite a bit. Let's move to one of their competitors. No, not Intel. Let's talk about Nvidia. And in particular, let's talk about this video they put out, this Before the Game video. That, well, it's rather cryptic, but there's some people who've watched it who think they have decrypted it.
Okay.
So I included a link down below to the original video. It's only 57 seconds long, but Lori Grunin over at CNET talks about how there's several scenes in the video that hint at what Nvidia is going to announce next week at their Before the Game event in Cologne, Germany, right before Gamescom. And they believe it's going to be the GeForce RTX 2080. In particular, they point to a number of hints throughout the video that you really have to look for. In particular, there's a set of instant messages and a set of texts and tweets between some people in the video that have the following usernames. Roy Tex with the R, T, and X capitalized.
Oh, gosh.
Not _11, indicating it's probably not the 11 series. Mac-20, again, another indication it's the 20 series. 8-T, T-E-E, for 80. Alana T, which is a reference to Alan Turing, which Turing is the name of this architecture.
Yeah.
Zenith 20, another reference to the 20 series. Ray, as in ray tracing, as in RTX. Give me 20. There are GPS coordinates located in it that happen to be identical to where the event is going to be right before Gamescom. And there are a number of date numbers that appear in the order 2080.
Well, to further support RTX, Nvidia did patent RTX, and I want to say a few other names as well. So that kind of further supports that that naming scheme for the model stack there, or for the 2080 stack or whatever.
And at SIGGRAPH 2018, this article was written on the 14th. So they're talking about on the 13th as yesterday. But at SIGGRAPH, NVIDIA announced its newest series of cutting-edge workstation cards, which they are calling Quadro RTX. So it would make sense that they were going to use a similar naming scheme for their high-end GeForce cards. At least one would think.
So I haven't quite put my finger on it, but there's some proprietary stuff in here somewhere. with ray tracing. I just can't quite place it.
Yes. In particular, their RTX technology that is exclusive to the Turing architecture. In particular, Nvidia claims a 6 times boost over previous gen Pascal in ray tracing operations. And they were able to show a real-time ray tracing demo at SIGGRAPH using a single Quadro RTX 6000 card.
I don't know. I can't quite put it in words, but something just kind of concerns me about their ray tracing approach. Just can't quite put my finger on it. It feels like G-Sync, kind of.
So when they announced RTX, they did announce a new version of GameWorks alongside it.
Yeah.
GameWorks has been controversial, to put it mildly.
Monopoly. Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry.
Basically, what they claim about RTX is that it fuses ray tracing, deep learning, and rasterization to fundamentally transform the creative process. Sorry, did I read that in my pretentious voice?
What's even more concerning is there was some press released, rumors, speculation, but it seems like from pretty solid sources, where the top of the model stack is going to have the ray tracing stuff in it, namely the 2070 on up, and then the 60 part on down is going to be GTX. I don't know what that means, but that kind of tells me maybe they only keep ray tracing for a subset of the market, because the majority of people will be buying those 60 and 50 parts.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this kind of thing before, right? When the 400 series parts and the Fermi parts came out, they did a ray tracing demo back then, but it was not in real time. And back then, I think they had to have like 3 GTX 480s to do the demo. And now they're doing it on a single card, and it is in real time. And so, I don't know. I think it's going to probably be a while before we see ray tracing really start to filter into mainstream video games. I think where you'll see more of ray tracing is in VR applications. Because ray tracing itself is not a new technology. In fact, ray tracing has been used for years in 3D graphics work. It's been used in special effects for Hollywood when they need to make a special effect look like it's actually in the scene.
Well, they used it in space movies in the 80s.
Right. But none of that was ever in real time. And that's what Nvidia is touting now, is that this ray tracing technology, RTX, lets them be able to do those same things in real time, which is impressive in and of itself. And having seen the demo, I mean, they're not bluffing, but like I said, ray tracing is not a new technique. There were some ray tracing ideas that go as far back as games like Doom and Wolfenstein 3D.
Mm-hmm.
But to keep it confined to only your high-end product stack. I don't know. And to take a GameWorks type approach and make it a proprietary technology.
I mean, that is kind of Nvidia's calling card.
That's true.
You know, they come up with the technology, they make it proprietary. Or if it is something that's already out there, like when they bought Aegea and they integrated PhysX into all their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that flopped.
Yep.
I mean,
it was pretty. It was nice for a second, but
I mean, I remember PhysX back around 2012. It was nice in Borderlands 2. But, you know, they have a tendency, they'll take a technology that if it wasn't proprietary already, they'll go and make it proprietary, or they'll re-implement it, or they'll make it exclusive to their cards. And honestly, I've just come to expect this from Nvidia at this point.
Yeah.
Not that it's a good thing, not that I think it's something they should continue to do, but it's kind of expected from them at this point. It doesn't surprise me anymore.
Well, I'm waiting for first to second quarter of 2019, personally, before I make another purchase, as tempted as I might be.
And I mean, if what they're saying is true, that the RTX 2080 is supposed to have better performance than Titan V, if that's true, then, you know, it is probably going to be a compelling purchase if you have the money for it. And that's the other part of it. We don't have any official numbers. But what we do know about it, based on the prices that are being set out there from the Quadro RTXs, we're probably looking at a significant price uplift. There have been some estimates of up to $999 for the RTX 2080.
That wouldn't surprise me. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
And considering the current Titan XP goes for $1,200, I mean,
it's going to sell like hotcakes too.
Yeah, it honestly, because there isn't anything else out on the market to compete against it, people are going to buy it.
People are starved for a new architecture at this point.
Because we've been starved by a GPU market that, up until the recent bursting of the crypto bubble, was starved of cards to begin with.
Exactly. People just held on to whatever they had, and they've just kind of gotten used to it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been running my RX 480s for over 2 years now. Well, not these RX 480s. I had an RX 480 beforehand when I built the system before this one. And when I got this system, it came with a pair of RX 480s. So in total, I've been using them almost 2 years.
But there's a bright side to it, though. When you've got a market segment like we've had with GPUs that's been out there for so long, the drivers have drastically improved performance. So if you look at drivers from 2 years ago and what the drivers are today and compare their performance, there was a recent benchmarking run I saw where the current GTX 1066 gig is basically stomping all over a Vega 56 with stock debut drivers. So they took current 1060 drivers and benchmarked it against the Vega 56 at launch with those drivers. And the numbers were actually better on the 1060 part. And when you look at current Vega 56 performance, it pretty much trades blows with the 1070 Ti. I think the 1070 Ti does come slightly ahead at the end of the day, but it's within 5%.
Right.
So I can't think of a time when drivers have improved performance so much on a set piece of hardware as we've had. So that's kind of the nice thing about it, but still.
Yeah, but it'll be nice to finally have a disruption in the GPU market that isn't crypto-based.
This is true.
And so, once again, over at Forbes, Jason Evangelo talks about how this is a smart little bit of marketing on NVIDIA's part, because it puts to rest a lot of the rumors that have been out there. You know, the rumor mill, we've been talking about it for the last couple of months, about is it the GTX 1180? Is it the GTX 2080? What's it going to be? Is it going to be Ampere or Volta or Turing? No,
Yep.
this with this nifty little 1 minute long video, NVIDIA has put to rest most of the rumors out there, and we finally have a specific date of August 20th. We will know something on August 20th.
Just be nice to see an announcement. Let the cards come out. You know, let them get benchmarked. See what happens with them. See what the new tech and the crazy hype's all about.
And if the leaked specs are to be believed, the RTX 2080 will feature around a 400 millimeter squared size die with approximately 2,944 CUDA cores, 184 TMUs, and 64 ROPs, featuring a core clock of around 1,750 megahertz.
What's the estimated TDP? Around 200?
Between 170 to 200 watts.
Yeah, so they're not looking at a huge die shrink compared to Pascal, so they've got to go with more of a monolithic style GPU.
It's actually going to be a larger die than Pascal.
Yeah.
Pascal was 314 millimeters squared. The RTX 2080 is rumored to be around 400.
Yeah. Yeah. So
but there will be an uplift in that they are going to 8 gigabytes of GDDR6, which will give approximately 4 more gigabits per second, upping the memory speed to 14 gigabits per second, entailing an increase in memory bandwidth to 448 gigabytes per second.
Yeah, that's what happens when you move architectures and you don't have a huge die shrink to in order to get the performance numbers that you expect or want to see, you go with a bigger GPU. More GPU real estate, essentially.
And there's also starting to be some rumors slip of custom variants of the RTX 2080. In particular, Gainword, who's not a big brand in the United States, but is a big brand overseas, talked about a triple fan variant that they're working on, as well as some alleged photos of a dual fan GTX 2080 Founders Edition, indicating that perhaps NVIDIA is going to be dropping the blower style fans for their Founders Edition cards.
I haven't heard much out of Gainword in a long time. A long time. I want to say they make good stuff. I wonder why they don't sell to the States.
To be honest, I'm not sure, but anyway, let's see. Was there anything else we need to discuss? Oh, yes. According to Tom's Hardware, talking to their sources within Nvidia, they say the pricing will be higher than the GTX 1080 Ti, which currently carries a $699 MSRP, but is expected to be less than the Titan XP, which is $1,200 MSRP.
So probably going to be 700 or 800.
So yeah, there's a $500 window there.
Only.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but there's no way I'm spending $1,200 or even $1,000 or even $800 on an 80 level part.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I'll watch other people buy it.
Yeah.
That's about what I'll do.
Yeah. They're going to jack prices up. They're going to sell like hotcakes. They're going to have some proprietary bits.
And if the Founders Edition is, let's say, 800, the AIB partners are going to jack theirs up because of the custom cooler and custom PCB. So that's going to be, if it's 800, it'd be like maybe $999, close to $1,000. I could definitely see that.
Until Nvidia decides to launch the TI variant 6 months from now.
Yep.
Because that's exactly what they did with the 1080. And then literally 9 months later, here's the 1080 Ti.
Yeah.
They did the same thing with Maxwell, too.
Or actually, it was even worse because what they did was, here's the 1080, here's the Titan X. Oh, here's the 1080 Ti, which is essentially a Titan X, but it's $500 cheaper.
Yeah. Oh, and here's the Titan XP.
X big P.
Yes, big P. Because the X little p was,
for some reason, an iteration that costs more.
Yeah. It's like we're going to rush one card out the door and then have time to refine a new one and rush basically the same card out the door, or just capitalize a P. Capitalize a letter.
Yeah. And then even on the low end, some of the shenanigans they've been pulling lately, particularly with we talked about this a couple weeks back, the GT 1030, the difference between the DDR4 and the GDDR5 version.
Yeah.
And how that utterly cripples the card.
Yeah. I'm hoping they're not going to do here's the 2070. Here's the 2070 Ti.
Oh goodness.
Yeah,
the 1070 Ti was funny. That had no reason to exist.
Yeah. Everybody, all the top level reviewers, there is no reason why this card should have been created.
It was created so that AMD to make AMD stop marketing that the Vega 56 was beating the GTX 1070.
Yeah.
They released the 1070 Ti to be just fast enough that it beat Vega 56, but intentionally gimped it in a way to make sure that it would not crowd out the 1080.
It's like a 1080 Junior.
Yeah, it's essentially a 1080 with a single SM unit disabled.
Yeah.
Whereas the 1070 is a 1080 with 2 SM units disabled.
Yeah.
Which it was pretty much a moot point anyway, because the Vega 56 prices went out all crazy. So
Yeah,
because the miners bought them all.
mm-hmm.
yeah, because the AMD cards were the better fit for mining.
Even to this day, you still cannot get a Vega 56 at MSRP.
Mm.
It's close.
All the Nvidia cards came down, but I can definitely see why the Vega cards aren't yet.
Yeah, remember the Vega 56 was supposed to be a $399 card.
Mm-hmm.
$399 USD.
Yeah.
I don't think it has ever been at that price actually.
It has never been at $400. It has never been at $399.
I think you can get some of the cheapest reference cooler variants for about $450 right now.
Wow.
Yeah, there was one. So I've been kind of looking at it and ultra tempted to get one, but there's a sapphire part that's a non-reference for $450.
Yeah.
Right now. And I almost got it. Almost. Until my hard drive died, and then my SSD died, and then my power supply died.
Wow.
Ouch. Cascade failure is a terrible thing.
So now there is officially no part from my previous build
Wow.
on this computer, except for the VRM ghettoified cooling I've got going on with that 120, that old 3-pin 120. Yeah, so there's a Sapphire Pulse Vega 56 for $449 right now. That's the cheapest I've ever seen.
I think that's something that would be an interesting product to have, is custom VRM cooling for motherboards that don't have good VRM cooling, and especially if they can somehow do RGB on it.
Oh,
like if you've seen the RAM coolers, like the it'll be a clip-on thing for the RAM, and it has a fan in the center.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those. In fact, Asus has some custom VRM coolers that will clip on to some of their higher-end Intel boards.
Yes, I saw something about that. Someone who did a build recently with X299 that had one of those coolers.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show you. I mean, if you've got a little bit of airflow on those VRM heat sinks, it pretty much cures all. Actually,
Yeah.
even though they're not, even though VRM heat sinks now are not that good, not as good as they were 5-6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Just not as much surface area. I mean, you can't really make a good heatsink look good, I guess, but
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, Hunter. It would be nice to see some good VRM heat sinks or some kind of aftermarket for that, but I don't know. I mean, is there really a market for that beyond overclocking? I don't know.
I know EVGA offers for their high-end motherboards, the X399 and the X299 motherboards, they do offer editions that have active VRM cooling. The X299 Dark, I think, is the one that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see that. I like to see motherboard manufacturers taking an active interest in keeping their chips or their VRMs cool. You don't see enough of that anymore.
Well, and the big thing with a lot of it anymore is it used to be a lot of people used the stock cooler, and because they're downdraft coolers, that way your VRMs got cooled just by the CPU fan running.
Right.
With most people in the enthusiast space transitioning to either tower coolers or to CPU water cooling, whether in a all-in-one liquid cooler or with an open loop, you lose that.
Mm-hmm.
You no longer have the effects of that downdraft cooler.
Yeah.
And and honestly, with CPUs consuming less power anymore, it's probably less of an issue. But there are situations where active VRM cooling is needed.
I remember seeing like one of the higher end boards having like the shielding either on the VRM or somewhere else on the board at the bottom or middle. I think it's actually on the left side of the board that had a tiny, maybe 60 millimeter fan in it. I don't remember what board that was, but it definitely wasn't the newer ones. So it was probably like the X99 if it was that series, or what?
I was going to say, back in the Socket 775 days, I remember the way you could tell the high-end motherboards apart from the budget ones was the high-end ones came with some kind of separate fan that you could attach to your heat pipe on your Northbridge and your VRM, because that was the big new thing.
Yeah. I remember those days. Doesn't seem like that long ago, honestly.
I remember I had an Asus P5B Deluxe board that I ran my Q6600 in for quite some time. And it was... I remember the big thing about it was it came with a detachable... it was a detachable 60 millimeter cooler that was... it was a little fan encased in a little piece of plastic, and it hooked onto the heat pipes that ran off the Northbridge and the VRM coolers, or the VRM heat sinks. And one of the big advertising point was, you know, you had this 60 millimeter direct cooler for your heat pipe. Because that was when heat pipes for your Northbridge and for your VRM heat sinks were the in thing.
Well, not too long ago, before the tough boards became not so good, I want to say there were some Intel Sabertooth boards that were in, I want to say either Z170 or Z97, right around there. Even by that point, there were a couple of good Sabertooth boards that had some active VRM cooling. Those boards look so good.
Yeah, I was a big fan of the Sabertooth. I think it was the Sabertooth P67 and Z68. Sadly, I could never afford those motherboards. But the Sabertooth series from the Sandy Bridge, Ivy Bridge days looked really good.
So did the 990. What was that chipset?
The Sabertooth 990FX. I had a friend who had one of those, and I was always just a little bit jealous.
That was such a good board. I had that board. That thing was a tank. I love that board.
Admittedly, now I do have a 990FX board that I use in my backup system, but it's a Gigabyte Gaming G1 that came significantly later.
Okay.
And as good a board as it is, I still wish I had gotten a Sabertooth 990FX back when they were a thing.
Yeah. It was just built so well. It had solid components, an amazing VRM.
And it was before Asus went RGB crazy.
Yeah. Rainbow Puke, I think is what.
Yes, Rainbow Puke.
Yep.
That is my opinion on most RGB setups. Is most people run it in Rainbow Puke mode.
Yeah, I do. Guilty. I just
Don't
let
get
it.
me wrong. I don't have a problem with RGB. I would rather have either a nice uniform theme to a system,
Yeah.
or if I'm going to do the RGB thing, then I need to build my system in a way that it makes sense to do RGB.
I can't wait to see somebody have a full RGB PSU, like with the RGB, the full set of RGB PSU cables. Because there is a PSU that has RGB at the power supply, where the cables plug into the power supply, but only 2 companies have a 24-pin RGB. It's still in the works. It was a prototype. Lee and Lee and some other, either German or whatever company had it. But I know someday they're either Lee and Lee or somebody is going to make a full set of RGB cables. So then your whole thing can be like a rave that's just insane.
RGB kids, use it responsibly.
Yeah. Actually, I've seen some pretty tasteful setups, and the nice thing about RGB is flexibility, because you can make it be whatever color you like.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember it was not that long ago that having an LED fan in your PSU meant that you were, try-harding the gamer aesthetic. and now it's I'm just waiting for the first RGB LED fan in a PSU.
Oh, they have them. Well, they have the colored ones. They don't have RGB. I know they have colored ones because Ramex has blue LED, and some red LED. But yeah, I wouldn't doubt that they would have a RGB, controllable RGB PSU fan.
Thermaltake makes one.
Ah.
I figure if anyone would, it would be Thermaltake.
Well, actually,
they RGB everything.
No. Actually, if it was anybody, it would be Corsair, because they are the RGB king. They created glasses.
With their whole Light Loop series.
They have glasses, like the reps had glasses on at QuakeCon one year, last year I went, that was RGB. It was circling.
Were they just make glasses out of a couple fans?
No. Surprisingly not. But yeah, it was like, really. And the funny thing about side topic, oh, never mind. I won't share that fun memory of QuakeCon. But yeah.
Oh, well, gentlemen, we are kind of closing in on our time target, and I hate to bring things to a close, but any last words before we call it a night?
I think the words you said, RGB responsibly, is a good thing.
There's one thing I want to say. AMD, respond to Nvidia, pretty please and thank you.
Yeah.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed everything you've seen here, of course, you can catch us every week. This is going to be the first week that we post on Fridays instead of Thursdays, because we have had to shuffle the YouTube schedule around a little bit. But you can catch us on Fridays here on CrossForge Gaming's YouTube channel. And of course, you can find more great content here on our YouTube channel. Keep your eye out for some game reviews in the near future. And if you want to catch more of us, me in particular, you can find me on Twitch on Tuesday evenings. I've been playing through Fallout 4 recently. I'm going to start exploring some other games here in the near future. But Jason, Hunter, where can everybody find you?
Let's see. I'm on Twitter. I don't post much. Currently, I'm not streaming anything. I guess Facebook.
Okay.
as Hunter Jackson on Facebook. Yeah, I haven't jumped into the game streaming market, but at some point I'm going to be doing a few product reviews, as I want to see if there's some products that can give some life into my currently old computer, because it's the FX 8320 computer, before I get into a newer build. So I might be posting some product review videos at some point.
Okay. If you do, make sure you let Patty know, because he's running a system very similar to yours.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I've got an A1 build coming. I've got a so there's going to be a full review there. I've got a cable management video coming, and I've got a couple of I've got one game review coming now that I'm getting my system back under control. And I do stream World of Warships from time to time. But as soon as I get my personal life situation figured out with my job move and selling my house and stuff, I'm definitely going to be doing a lot more with TechForge gaming and building a YouTube channel for tech reviews and stuff. So
Nice.
Cool.
I've got a lot of builds coming.
Nice.
Fun stuff. Well, once again, thank you all for watching. And if you'd like to see more of our great content, of course, please stay tuned. I've been Dynamo Ned. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life gets you down, forge on.
Yep, forge on.